Oh, hey, my name's Mitch. Welcome back to the series I'm Turning 30, where I, Mitch, talk about my journey to turning 30, whether that's events that have happened in the past, present, or future. And as you can see by the title today, I'm going to be talking about my trip to Mount Fuji this summer. As some of you may know, there was a lot of events that happened up to going to Fuji, at Fuji itself, and coming back. I haven't really shared all of what has happened to a majority of people. Some people do know most of the details, but I figured this might be the easiest way to kind of let people know kind of what happened during the trip. All right, so let's start off the day before the trip itself. Out of nowhere, a super random medical condition kind of reared its head, something that I had never dealt with that I needed to get checked out, which isn't necessarily uncommon since I've come to Japan. I've had random things kind of just pop up since I've been here. For example, I think it was like a few months after I got here, I got this. If you can look at this picture, you can see for some reason one day I was just sitting at my computer and my nose just swelled up like crazy. So I've had these random things kind of pop up every now and then. I won't disclose exactly what this one was because it's a little bit more personal, but just know that this kind of happened right before I was about to go to Fuji, the day before, like the night before. Luckily, just like my nose, these type of things kind of had gone away fairly quickly. Any type of random condition or something that's happened to me kind of went away or stopped being an issue, and I figured it was either something that I ate or maybe just I got a random bug bite somewhere and it would kind of go away, which is what I assumed was going to happen in this case. I kind of played it off. It's just the nerves, something happened, I'll be fine, nothing will happen going into it the next day. Spoiler alert, it did not go away. I'll talk a bit more about that later. While this condition had just started, I was in the process of finishing packing and getting everything ready to go to Mount Fuji. This included making sure I had enough water, snacks, the right type of clothing to wear, the type of shoes that I should wear, just everything that you would kind of need to climb Mount Fuji, whether that was the clothing items that I mentioned or food, things like that. It's recommended you don't carry a whole lot because you would have to carry it all the way up the mountain, so I tried to concisely pack my backpack as best as I could, and I fit pretty much everything I needed in a backpack, not like super full, but I had a decent amount of things. This included all of my clothes, a couple of water bottles, and a hydro flask that I had put into my backpack. Now, if you don't know, I didn't go to Mount Fuji alone. I went with kind of a local here in this city that I live in that has been very helpful for me to kind of go out and do things and do certain events and activities. He kind of gives me information about when things happen, invites me to go, helps me sort of translate because he can speak an okay amount of English, but he was the one that was going to be driving me up to Mount Fuji. And so he's going to be driving us there. I believe the drive from my home to Mount Fuji is like, I think it was 4 to 6 hours, somewhere in there. And the reason that this guy invited me to go to Mount Fuji with him is that he was celebrating kind of finishing his physical therapy and rehabbing for his knee. He had gotten surgery the year prior and was kind of doing it as a last hurrah type of thing, saying, I conquered the physical therapy, and also he's getting up there in age and wanted to make sure that he did it at a time where he was still physically able to do so because he had never done it before. Now we get in the car and start to drive. In the past, he has told me many times, and is one of, I think, his prideful things that he enjoys about himself, is that he says that he functions on not a lot of sleep. So one of the first things that he mentions upon getting in the car and starting to drive is the amount of sleep that he got. He informs me that he got about 2.5 hours of sleep the night before because he doesn't sleep a lot to begin with, and he was like excited, nervous, so he couldn't really sleep that much. Now, I wasn't really worried because seemingly through all our interactions and things when he's told me he hasn't gotten a lot of sleep, he's been fine. Not nodded off during really anything. He seems pretty alert and fine. But I quickly came to realize on the drive up there that it may have been affecting him more than he let on. I quickly realized that he had a couple of energy drink shots, like the 5-hour energy things that are very popular in America, but like a Japanese version, as well as a couple of different coffee drinks that he had either brought, or we would stop at a rest stop about 30 minutes to an hour into the drive to get another one from a vending machine. So needless to say, while I think he is okay on a certain amount of sleep, I think the amount and type of sleep that he got the night before was not the greatest. And including at the rest stop that I mentioned where he bought a coffee, before he bought the coffee, he even said that he wanted to take a 10-minute nap, again, less than an hour into our drive, to try to recenter himself, which again, got me a little worried, especially because part of the reason he wanted to take this 10-minute nap is because he felt like he was swerving while we were driving on the freeway. So while I was worried, I was glad that he knew his limits and had some type of coping mechanism. So I walked around the rest stop. However, like I mentioned, he really didn't fall asleep, got up, bought a coffee, and decided we were just going to go because he couldn't fall asleep. And we had to pick up 2 other people that we were going to be climbing Mount Fuji with. So the drifting and the swerving continues, and nothing super dangerous happens. Obviously, it's a little scary, but we get to the people that we were going to Mount Fuji with just fine. And I wasn't sure what really changed as soon as we picked these 2 people up. Maybe it's because he was talking more with the other 2 members that we picked up. By the way, the 2 members that we picked up is a mom, I want to say that's about 40 to 50, I want to say, somewhere in that range, and her 9-year-old son, who is her youngest child. The mom is like a huge athlete, marathon runner. She had tried to climb Fuji, I think like 6 years ago or something, and she got altitude sickness and could not complete the climb, so she wanted to do it again and actually complete it. And she brought along her 9-year-old son, who I guess wanted to do it as well. But back to the man that was driving. After we picked these 2 up and he was talking to them, he started to struggle with where the GPS was telling him to go. It was kind of confusing. I didn't really understand that he just wasn't understanding the GPS until quite a few missed turns and U-turns and things to just get out of a city block that we were in. And at this point, I thought maybe the mom that we had picked up would be able to drive. Maybe she would be more adept and be okay because she had gotten more sleep. And he informed me that he would be driving the whole way because she did not like to drive on the freeway. She got scared of driving on the freeway and it freaked her out and she would get anxiety. So he had to drive the whole way there. And I can't drive because I don't have a Japanese driver's license. So he was stuck driving the whole way, even being lost and tired. Also, you have to remember this man has just gotten a major surgery on his knee less than a year ago and has to drive all this way. There's just a lot of factors going into play in how this car ride is going. Luckily, since you're seeing this, you know nothing tragic happened during the ride, no car crash, no minor car crash, nothing happened, all safe and good, but there was that element to the story that just adds something to this whole experience that has happened. So while it continued, we're safe, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. While concerning, I'm just glad that nothing dangerous happened, and we were aware of our limits and took breaks as many times as needed. The drive maybe could have been faster if we didn't have those roadblocks, but again, I'd rather just keep having to stop and letting him rest rather than hurrying and possibly being put in a more dangerous situation. Now, I couldn't leave that part out, especially because for the rest of this story, everything from here on out is my fault, so it feels good to know there was a portion of the story that I didn't really cause or affect or could really do anything about. So it's nice to know that I wasn't 100% the reason this might have been a wild experience for me. At one point during the ride up, we were getting lunch and we had to move some stuff around in our bags, and the driver picked up my bag and noticed that it was wet on the bottom. He mentioned this to me and I said, oh, it's probably just condensation from the water bottles or my hydro flask or something. Like, I'm not super worried about it. So he said, okay, we closed it, had lunch, and we came back out to the car and began moving it. And this time I moved my backpack and I touched the bottom and I was like, that is not just condensation wetness. I'm actually kind of worried that something has happened. And then it dawns on me. The seal on top of the hydro flask that I own is broken. It's this hydro flask right here. I got this hydro flask years ago, and while hydro flasks generally last for a long time, something had happened to the seal on this one where it's not a perfect seal. It's still okay. It's not like broken, but water does leak out of it. If it is tipped over for a too long period of time, it will start to leak. Now, obviously, if it's upside down, it leaks way more, and if it's on its side, it doesn't leak as fast, but it does still leak. Now, because of the way that my backpack was oriented, the hydro flask was tilted a little bit and it was full, and from the car moving and stuff laying down, it pretty much went full sideways. So I had forgotten that this was the case just because, again, I don't really take my hydro flask a lot of places. I kind of just leave it on my desk at home and have it near my bed. It's never really in a position where I can remember it leaks. I don't go hiking a whole lot or really packed for these things, so I just didn't think about it, forgot that it did it, and I opened my bag and I had put the hydro flask pretty much near the top of my bag, which means everything that could soak water had. So this meant all of my clothes were wet: underwear, socks, shirts, everything. This also meant that I had lost water in my hydro flask that I had needed for the hike, that I should have for the hike, as it's a long hike and you want to bring as much water as possible so you don't have to spend a ton of money buying it on the way up as the water gets more expensive. You also shouldn't bring, I guess, a ton of water because it can be heavier to carry, but you should bring enough where you shouldn't have to just keep buying water at every place, as it could get a lot more expensive. While this is a bummer, it wasn't soaking wet. Everything was just fairly damp, and we were staying at a small capsule hotel at the 5th station on Fuji. This meant I could lay some of my clothes out and try to figure out different ways along my small capsule bed to try to air dry things the night before we started to climb. Also, with the heat from the hiking, a lot of the stuff that I would be wearing would hopefully dry out quickly from the body heat that I would be emitting just from doing a physical activity, which it kind of did. However, it did make it fairly cold when we started. We started at about 4 a.m. and it was a little bit cold on the mountain, so the starting with the damp clothing, not the best, but overall wasn't terrible. But again, just kind of tapping on the next thing to this whole experience. Right after we pulled over for lunch and we found out that all of my clothes had been soaked and were very damp and wet, it was at this point that I could feel my medical condition that I mentioned earlier as we were driving getting worse. It was something that wasn't noticeable to other people, which is good, but I could feel it in my body becoming a much, much worse and consistent thing than it was the day before. Now, I hoped while I was going up that it wouldn't be a super big deal, and that even if it was worse that day that we were going up, maybe that was going to be kind of the peak, the plateau, and it would kind of just go away. I am just huffing the copium that this is just not a big deal and that I will not have to worry about it. Luckily, it wasn't so impairing that it would inhibit my ability to climb the mountain. And again, it wasn't something that people would notice, so they wouldn't say anything about me climbing, but it was something that I could feel. And because it was something that I could just constantly feel, my mind, and because of the way that it felt, I just could not stop thinking about this condition, especially since it was something that I'd never encountered. You know, you start getting that little voice in the back of your head when it's like this, feels like a seemingly kind of serious thing that you should probably see a doctor for. You start telling yourself, if I don't see a doctor, what will happen? And just all these kind of thoughts started running through my head as I was dealing with this driving up and on the mountain itself. Now, I briefly mentioned earlier that we started climbing the mountain at 4 a.m. Now, I told some people that I was starting at 4 a.m. They were aware that this was happening, and I had told them what I thought was happening is that we were starting at 4 a.m., climbing for a little bit because of the nature of who we had on the climb, somebody that just got knee surgery and a 9-year-old. I thought we were going to climb up the mountain part way, stop at a place for a little bit and like either nap or rest, and then kind of continue on. That was not the case. I thought this because of the time that I had requested off when I originally got the plan that we were going to Mount Fuji like months beforehand. I like to request my time off months beforehand if I'm going on a big trip, just to kind of make sure that I give them proper notice and leeway and they can find replacements or do whatever they need to do at any job I'm at, not just for teaching, but if I know I'm going to go somewhere, I give them as much notice as possible so that they can figure out what they need to do. And I forgot, in my past self's infinite wisdom, I gave myself an extra day off so I could recuperate after going to Mount Fuji, rather than this is the day we're coming back, you're going to work the next day. I decided I'm going to take this day after I get back off just so I can rest my muscles, rest my body if something happens, you know, just kind of chill out and relax. So lo and behold, we did the whole hike in one day, which with my medical condition, a 9-year-old and a guy that just got physical therapy, took us much longer than most people that are of an average build or an average fitness level would kind of have to do to climb the entire mountain. So all of these things kind of begin to build up. It was a less than calm drive up. All of my clothes were wet. There was this underlying medical condition that I wasn't really talking to anybody about, just kind of hoping would blow over, but was really all I could think about. And I started to kind of worry that it was going to impair the climb, even though it isn't really something that could do that, but you start to get in that headspace. I figure out that we're now doing the climb in one go. We're not stopping and resting. So the stress is slowly building one on top of the other. So my mental state's not in the greatest position, but again, nothing too crazy to impair the climb, just some stress and anxiety that hopefully will kind of just, as we're starting the climb and getting up, I will kind of just be able to get over. Some good things that could have worked in my favor if they had gone correctly. We did get up to the mountain at around 5:36 p.m. So we were there 10 hours before we were going to start the hike. This meant that we could eat dinner at the fifth station, we could get a decent amount of sleep beforehand and be well rested, and having just eaten, be able to have at least some food for nutrients in our body climbing up. However, like I mentioned before, with all my wet clothes, I needed to kind of spread them out along my entire little capsule that I was in, and I was not very comfortable that night. One, capsule hotels are not always super comfortable, especially when it's a heavily touristy area. They kind of just go as bare as possible with everything. This includes pillows, blankets, mattress. So even though we had enough time to get a decent amount of sleep, I didn't necessarily sleep for 8 hours. I don't exactly remember when I fell asleep, but I definitely didn't get 8 hours. Honestly, I feel maybe that I got around 3 to 4. And for those that know me, that's definitely not a good amount for me. And people know that's not a good amount for me because many people that are close to me will tell you when I don't get enough sleep and have to do a big event the next day, I always get sick. It's not that I'm grumpy. It's not that I'm going to want to not do something or get up, or I'm not a morning person. It's that I will physically throw up when I have to get up early to do something and I have not slept enough. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know what kind of condition it is. I don't know what kind of sickness. I've never really told, I guess, a doctor about it. It's kind of just been happening to me my whole life. And I've had to change my diet and how things work in the morning to kind of compensate for that, to try to make myself not be sick. There were many days in high school that I would not tell a soul about this. And even though I had these ways to cope, during first period, I would often ask to go to the bathroom and throw up a few times in the morning and then continue on at school and be fine for the rest of the day after I'd thrown up a few times. But I've always had this condition and always essentially hid it because it didn't ever feel like a super big deal, but just something that I've had to deal with. So yeah, it's a known phenomenon for me. Many people, friends, family know that I do this. They are kind of prepared for it. I usually will prepare people for it. If something even remotely close to an event is happening, I will let them know, please, if we can, let's leave it this time so I can sleep enough just so I don't have to be sick. And if it's not possible, I let them know, hey, I might be sick, just so you're aware, let's try to plan for it, I'll plan for it, that type of thing. So we're starting the hike at 4 a.m. and it gets to around 3 a.m. So 3 a.m. rolls around and I can't sleep at all. I am trying my hardest and I wanted to sleep a little bit longer, but 3 a.m. comes and I decide I'm just gonna slowly prep to get ready for us to leave at 4 rather than just try to sleep for an extra 40 minutes. So I do the Wordle for the day, as it was something that I pretty much always do right when I wake up. And after the Wordle, because I'm feeling sick, I'm like, I'm gonna try to let some steam out in the bathroom as well as try to go to the bathroom again, trying to prep myself, kind of keep it low key that I'm sick and have this underlying medical condition that's totally separate from the sickness. But essentially I'm just gonna try to release all of the tension by throwing up and going to the bathroom and making sure that I don't have to kind of think about it. Again, pretty standard stuff for me when I do these type of things. I'm just sick and I'm kind of used to it happening. Now I'm sitting in this bathroom on Mt Fuji at this capsule hotel. There's a stall and a urinal. I'm inside the stall. And as I have finished relieving myself, all of a sudden I start to kind of get lightheaded. Now this has happened to me before, not necessarily when I'm sick, but you know, I think everybody has had this moment where it's just like kind of like all of a sudden you just like stood up and you kind of get that like moment and it just flashes and you kind of just feel like you need to like brace yourself. And it's happened to me before, so I kind of just like put my arms out against the sides of the stall just like this, kind of like back to the stall door, as the stall's pretty small, but I'm kind of just doing this, and next thing I know, darkness. Now I don't actually remember the darkness that well. The next thing I remember thinking was, why can't I get out from the side of this toilet? And then I remember doing like rolling motions and like flipping over and like feeling like I was like doing a barrel roll in the stall. Like I couldn't like figure out what was going on. Not really sure how much time passed with this happening. I don't know if I got lightheaded and then immediately passed out, or if some time passed and then I passed out, or what really was happening in that moment. I know it wasn't a super long time, but I have no idea how much time really happened in this bathroom experience. But as I'm doing the rolling motions, the barrel roll motions, at one point my glasses fall off of my head and I hear them hit the floor, and for some reason that triggers in my brain as like an oh no moment, and I'm able to like open my eyes. And the next thing I know, I have my legs and hands all curled up and like in like a pretzel type shape right on the left side of the toilet of the Mt Fuji 5th station capsule hotel bathroom. I'm in this weird contorted shape, very confused, still kind of lightheaded, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually like passed out. So I had blacked out and fallen over in the bathroom stall at the very least. I had apparently hit my head, which I really didn't realize until the 9-year-old who I was doing the climb with mentioned to me on the hike, why do you have this red line across your head? And as you can see in this picture right here, I would assume I hit my head on something. I have no idea why I would have just this random long red mark across my forehead, but I had seemingly passed out, hit something, and had what seems to be a small seizure or something along those lines, I think, at the very least. One of the first things I do when I stand up and come to is check the time to try to figure out how much time has passed. It was at a time before 4 o'clock, which I felt lucky about. Meant my group wasn't looking for me passed out in the bathroom stall. No one was going to be freaking out because, again, I was trying to not ruin the experience for the other people that I was with. I was not prioritizing myself. I wanted them to have a good time, if anything, and not have to worry about me. So now that this has happened, while my mental state is terrible, now my physical state is also not great. So now, as you can tell, I'm not in a great mental state and obviously now physical state. So the next thing that happens kind of after I get my bearings about the time, I kind of start feeling myself about to get like really hot and break out into a sweat. I decide to stand outside in a tank top and shorts to kind of let myself cool down, as it's much cooler due to the elevation on Fuji, and just kind of let myself chill out for a second. So I'm standing outside reflecting on everything that's happened, and it comes to mind, this is all before the hike. We haven't even started the hike and all of this has happened and is in my mind and now is affecting my body as well. Again, like I said, I didn't want to ruin everyone else's experience, so I decided not to tell anybody that we're going to continue the climb. I'm not going to say anything, and I want everyone to have a good time, not worry about me. We're going to do the hike. I'm going to try my best to climb as much as I can. I was also slightly stressed out about the language barrier, even if I did mention it, that I wouldn't be able to properly convey kind of what had happened to me. While their English ability is okay and my Japanese ability is okay, I don't really study medical terms or really anything that's kind of happened to me up to this point. I can't really explain the me being sick when I wake up early condition, and I don't know, it doesn't have a name. So this whole thing I'm just kind of concealing due to the language barrier and not wanting to ruin the experience for other people. So in my semi-damp clothing with the worst mental and maybe physical state that I've ever been in my entire life, I decide I'm going to climb the tallest mountain in Japan. Unfortunately for me, this passing out, kind of thinking about trying to cool off, the amount of sleep that I got, the clothes, was still not enough to stop whatever condition it is that I will get sick if I don't get enough sleep. So we start the hike at about 4 a.m. Everything's going hunky-dory. We're going up. We get to about 6th station, which is about 45 minutes to an hour from 5th station based on the pace that we were going, and I feel it coming. And that's when it starts, and I start to throw up. Now, something that I was worried about when I started to throw up, or knew that I was going to throw up, was throwing up and then passing out. I had just passed out in the bathroom, so I was worried that all these sickness things were related, and I was going to throw up and then black out on the mountain. And that was the thing I was the most stressed about. So after I threw up the first time and I didn't pass out, I was like, okay, I have the willpower to get up the mountain. If I don't pass out when I throw up, then I will be fine. It will take us longer, but I will be able to get up. At this point, my group started to get a little bit worried for me, especially because the throwing up didn't stop after just once. I threw up maybe a total of 7 times over the course of 2 or 3 hours. And eventually we got to another station and I bought a Coca-Cola. Now, many people I think have this belief, and it was instilled in me when I was younger, and it just works. I don't know if it's a placebo effect or an actual medical thing, but Coca-Cola or Sprite or ginger ale, whatever, but Coke for me and my family is something that we would drink when we would be kind of just throw up sick, and that was it, to kind of settle our stomach or at least have something to be in there to throw up rather than just the acid itself. And let me tell you, as soon as I drank the Coca-Cola, I didn't throw up once. As soon as I had the first sip of Coca-Cola, didn't throw up a single time. I don't know what it is, it works. So highly recommend, if you're looking for a way to kind of settle your stomach when you're sick, just drink a little bit of Coke. I'm not saying down a bottle or a can, just kind of sip on it as you're sick and let it kind of figure its medicinal properties in your stomach to make you feel better. I don't know why it works. Maybe it'll work for you. Other than that, while I was climbing the mountain, not a whole lot happened. I talked to a few people climbing the mountain, some Japanese natives, and my Nihongo was more Jozu than ever. My group met another group of people that live in the same city as me, which is wild if you know how big my city is. And they knew each other and had no idea that they were climbing at the same time. I didn't know them, but the guy I went with knew them. We had no idea that we were going to be climbing Mount Fuji the same day at around the same time. It was crazy to find somebody else from our town. We also were climbing pretty close to a blind person the whole time. They had a guide that was helping them climb the mountain, and they were climbing Mount Fuji as a blind person faster than my group was climbing. There was also at one point apparently a famous Japanese like triathlon runner or marathon runner or some type of athlete. Like, she's like one of the biggest like athletes in Japan. I don't even know what her name was or anything like that. I was told afterwards. I remember her because she was wearing like the triathlon marathon get up with like the colorful jersey and the sunglasses and everything, and the way that she was running just looked like marathon-esque anyway. So we apparently saw her, which was cool. Didn't meet her technically, but I mean, I went on the same day as a famous person, so that's cool. There was just so many cool things to see, and the differences in people climbing the mountain. Again, to the marathon runner, to like me, who doesn't really do a whole lot of hiking, a 9-year-old that I was with, this guy who just got physical therapy, seeing groups of tourists of like these like 50 to 70-year-olds that are doing it before they can't do it anymore. Like, I don't know what countries they were from, but just like seeing them do this regardless of their age. It's just like all types of people were trying to attempt to climb Mount Fuji. I don't know necessarily who made it to the top and all. You do see certain people at the top and you're like, oh, it's cool, they made it, blah, blah, blah. But my group did end up finishing it. The lockdown wasn't nearly as eventful. Don't really have any stories from it. I did get pretty badly sunburned. I'll put the pictures up here as well. Now, nothing really to report on the way down. I will say, once we got above the clouds on the top of the mountain and there was just more sun, it was colder on the top, but also since the cloud cover wasn't giving us anything that wasn't covered got sunburned. I was wearing like long sleeves and like thermals, but just like a small part on my neck and my hands got pretty sunburned. This is a picture of my hands that got sunburned while I was on Fuji. And we did the climb about a month and a half ago, and I still have the like tan lines on my hands. But yeah, other than that, on the way down, I mean, my knees kind of hurt as I was going down. That's kind of to be expected as you're going down, just the amount of pressure that you're putting on your knees as you're going down for so many hours. It's just kind of bound to not feel the greatest. But nothing really tragic else happened on this entire trip. The rest of it was pretty good. Again, completing it all was fun. I called a lot of my friends and family to kind of celebrate that I had finished this and let them know that I had gotten sick. Didn't share this full story until now. Kind of told people that it was a crazy experience, and it really was. It was, and probably is, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And obviously for a lot of different reasons. It made me really think about different aspects of my life and different values that I had. Communicating with people, doing cool things, body limitations under extreme circumstances, which I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, because I climbed Fuji after essentially throwing up, not having necessarily any calories in me. Again, and like I said, the worst states possible, I was still able to push my body to the limit and climb this mountain. It made me really happy that I was doing this series in general, talking about my life, talking about the different things that I value and things that I enjoy and things that have happened to me. It made me realize that this is part of the reason why I wanted to share this series, is when I have experiences like this, that I can share them with people that they know who I am, what I kind of go through on a day-to-day basis. Maybe this story has helped you and made you think about your lives more. Hopefully you're not super worried about me. I do appreciate the sentiment or any worry that you have, but as you can tell, I'm here, I'm fine, nothing bad has happened. As far as the medical condition goes, after I got back from Fuji, I did have to go to the hospital a few times and get antibiotics to treat it. I am fine now, it is gone, don't have to worry about it. Whether you think I'm dumb for doing the climb in this situation, angry that I did it, happy for me that I kind of overcame all of this to do it, I appreciate any and all thoughts that you put towards me while I told you this story. Believe me when I've thought about all of those types of emotions, and I've done a lot of self-reflection after the events based on everything that happened during it. And who knows, maybe I haven't really even fully processed everything that's happened yet. It might take me a while to do that, who knows. And then just as a small funny bonus to the end, we went to a hotel after we finished our descent to the climb that we were going to stay at to leave the next day. We had a big barbecue with a bunch of drinks, and we were able to relax in an onsen and get a massage from a nice massage chair. We got this really nice place to stay at. However, when we get to the room that we would be sleeping in, there is no air conditioning. Now, if you know anything about Japanese summers, you know that this is a major issue. It's blazing hot here, and having a room without any type of air conditioning is a nightmare. Now, there was a fan in the room, and I was already tired, so it wasn't a huge deal. I did sleep fine, but definitely not the ideal situations after everything that's happened and was technically still happening on the trip. And along with the air conditioning, there was a light in this room that did not have an off switch. I literally searched this room for about an hour before I went to sleep, trying to figure out how to turn off this light, because it's really hard for me to sleep when there is a light in the room, let alone a bright main light in the room. There was no way to turn this off. No switch, nothing. The only way you could turn it off if you really wanted to was to unscrew it, and I couldn't unscrew it because the light bulb was burning hot because it's always on. So yeah, wasn't the greatest night of sleep. Still slept okay because I was mega tired from everything that had happened, but not what I wanted when I had just done one of the hardest things in my life. I really would have loved to have had a much better room, but hey, what can you do? Thanks for listening to this Fuji story. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments down below. And if you like this story and you want to hear more things like this, hey, you should subscribe. I put out new videos every single Tuesday, and things like this may come up, and I post weekly, so you'll be able to see them in all their gloriousness. Thanks once again, guys, for supporting me. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for watching this one, and I'll catch you in the next one next week. See ya!